Today we're going to be talking about sensuality and the body. So I have a question for you, Sorrel.
Okay.
Why can't your ears be 12 inches long?
Why can't my ears be?
Yeah, they will never grow to be 12 inches long.
Oh, gosh, I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Because then it would
Thought
be.
about it. I figured that one out.
Here's the punchline.
I'm a genius.
Good morning, Daily Huddle family. This is your host, Dr. Monikah Ogando. Welcome to Spiritual Matters Thursday. I'm so excited because we're going to be talking about spirituality today. Oh my goodness. Okay, so look, I have a cast of amazing people here. Stan, how are you, and what are you thankful for today? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that.
There you go.
I am no longer muted. I have a voice. I am what I say I am, no longer muted.
There you go. There you go.
And I'm thankful for the fact that I have a voice. Daily Huddle helps me have one. Thank you.
Amen. I love that. I love that. Thank you. Tara, where are you?
Good morning. I am right here, the only place that matters.
Amen. The only place that matters. Yes. And Sorrel, who are you going to hug today?
I'm going to hug my wife.
Yay.
She doesn't have feet next to her head.
Her ears. That's crazy.
That joke was crazy.
It was crazy, right? I was like, okay, I got, like, as soon as I said, I was like, yep, that's it. That's the one we're using today. So today we're going to talk about the question that we have at hand is sensuality a stepping stone, or let's say a gateway to your spirituality? Now hear me out before you guys get all crazy, because I know how you 20 toes could be. Okay. I don't mean like that. I don't mean just like that, because I do mean that, but I don't mean just that. So sensuality really is about using your senses, right? And so it requires that you be connected to your physical body, to your senses. And so a lot of what we first ingest about the world, before we do it through cognitive memory, before we do it through thought or language, we do it through sensory perception, including when you are in your mother's womb, before you even have a thought, before you even have a feeling, before you even have a word, you have a sensory perception. And so when your eyes can look upon nature, can look upon another human being, when your hands or your mouth or your skin can touch a tree or another person, or just your place in the world, your sensory perception gives you a sense, pardon the pun, of your place in the world as it relates to other organisms and other humans and things that have place in the world as well. It answers the question, who am I, where do I belong, and how do I belong? And so sensuality is at very first an awareness and a recognition of your place and being in the world. And then about your relationships. Does that make sense? Oh, I need to see some nodding. Okay. So then you take that even more deeply, and then we talk about the way that we usually interpret sensuality, which has a sexual component to it, a flirty, a romantic, an intimate connection kind of component to it. And typically, the Western traditions not the African traditions, not the Eastern traditions, just the Western tradition, have shied away from and in fact vilified any kind of sensory connection to the divine because they consider it dangerous, because they consider it sinful, because they consider it untrustworthy, etc. And if you study religions across the board, as I've done, you'll notice that the cultures that are least connected to other people, i.e., colonizing cultures, are the ones that are least connected to God. And so sensuality being a gateway to your spirituality is a great way to bring yourself back. You know, we talked a couple of weeks ago about how do I begin my spirituality journey? And then last week we talked about what's the difference between spirituality and religion. And so today, when we're talking about sensuality being a gateway to spirituality, it's like, let's start with the basics. Like, go back to being a baby. A baby doesn't have a thought. A baby doesn't have words. A baby just has sensory perception. So how can you use your sensuality to connect to the world and the people around you so that through those connections and that intimacy and that feeling of belonging and contrast, you can also find your way to your own spirituality and your own connection to God. Does that make sense? So I'm not going to talk much about this because I think this is going to be one of those discussions that are best sussed out in dialogue. So I'm going to open the dialogue early and just be like, okay, guys, let's go. Let's roll up our sleeves. What are we talking about here? Because some of our ancient traditions also include, for example, Tantra. And Tantra is a combination of movement, meditation, connection, and so forth. So it's not just about whatever reductive thing you've seen in the media about Tantra. And so let's talk about it. Let's talk about how is sensuality a gateway to your spirituality, and how can it be? How can you use it to be a gateway to your spirituality? So let's talk about it.
Oh, this is fascinating. And I'm wondering if clearly you believe that sensuality is a gateway to spirituality. So if that is in fact true, what is it that you're suggesting? Like, how can we use our senses to become closer to our spirituality?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the
She frozen, or is that me?
No, I'm here. Can you
you're just yeah. Could you hear my question?
Yes, I heard you.
Okay. You're just really taking it in. I see that.
So one of the most basic ways that we can use sensuality to connect to our spirituality is by being aware. Our senses bring us to the present moment, right? And so what are you seeing right now? What are you smelling right now? What are you saying right now? You know, what do you feel? Like, not feel like a feeling emotion, but feeling like a sensation, right? Being aware of where your body is. Are your shoulders hunched? Is your stomach tight? Is your butt tight? Are your jaws tight, right? And so when you can just be aware of how your body is being in the moment, then you can connect that to different things. So I don't remember if we talked about chakras in an earlier episode here, but some of you are familiar with chakras. I was telling a friend of mine the other day that I could tell my body was telling me that it wasn't good to hold my truth in, that I wasn't speaking my truth to a particular person about a particular thing, because my jaws were clenched. Every time I came around this person, my jaws were clenched. And I noticed that, and I was like, that's because you got to speak up, girl. No wonder your shoulders are tight, because they're like holding on to this stress, you know? And so to be connected to your body in this way allows you to see some spiritual lessons that you wouldn't otherwise have seen. That's one of the basic ways to do it. Stacy says the foods that we taste are also connected to our spirit. Absolutely. So pro tip, the chakras have colors associated with them as well. So for example, when I want to work on my root chakra, the root chakra color is red. So I'll eat red foods, especially spicy foods, even though I'm not a spicy person, but I'll stretch, because I know that exercise allows my root chakra to really start emitting energy. And what I mean by root chakra is like the base of your spine, like right at the bottom where your butt meets the earth, as it were, it's perpendicular to the earth. And so your root chakra represents your groundedness, your centeredness, your connection to the earth, your awareness of your own survival, of your own right to belong, etc. And so when I was doing some root chakra work, because I was feeling like just heady and just everywhere and just disconnected from, like, okay, bring yourself to center. So one of the things that I did was, number one, connect to that. Number two, go walking barefoot so that I could kind of like feel myself connected to the earth, and then eat red foods, because those red foods connected my root chakra as well. Let's see what else. Somebody says, the music that resonates with us directs our spirit, positive or negative. Yeah. So let me tell you something about the music before I get Sorrel. I see your hand in a second. Did you know that the resonance? So I don't know if you've heard about solfeggio frequencies, but the resonance that is natural for music is 432 hertz, 432 hertz. However, when the Germans wanted to indoctrinate their people, they changed the music standard to be 440 hertz. Just 8 hertz above is a different resonance musically, frequency-wise, than 432. And it's easier to indoctrinate the mind in 440 than it is at 432. At 432, you're amplifying it, not trying to get it to, codify to a particular discipline. And so I just thought that was very interesting. So now I only listen to my music. I changed my music inside of my streaming thing to 432. It sounds a little weird, but I like it better. It just kind of like works better for my heart. Sorrel, what were you going to say, sir?
This is what I'm going to say. I looked up the word sensuality.
Yes.
And the standard definition says the enjoyment, expression, or pursuit of physical, especially sexual pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And in my experience, traditionally, religions have tended to point to sensuality as something that actually impedes spirituality or impedes connection with the divine. So in your studies, what have you found in terms of that? How do people traditionally impede their connection to spirituality by denying or even resisting sensuality?
Right. History / sociology / comparative religions lesson. Here we go. So I want you to just think of the movement of human beings across millennia. Like, obviously, when it's across millennia, it's generalization, right? It's not about an individual history or a country or whatever. So across millennia, the folks that were born in Africa, that then moved north to Europe and the mountains up north, eventually, through thousands and thousands of years, they lost their melanin because they didn't need it. They were not exposed to the sun. The air was thinner, so their noses thinned out. And so melanin across their body, so not just their skin, but also their eyes, etc. Right? So they had less resistance or more resistance to the sun. And when you go up there and you only have about 3 months maybe of warm weather, the rest of the time is just snow and desolation, you're really, really, really interested in surviving. And so when you're really, really interested in surviving, and that's the bare minimum, then sex is not a pleasurable thing. Sex is just for reproduction. Like, we just have to stay alive. We just have to continue the species, right? It's a very pragmatic decision to make. I don't blame them at all. But then what happens is that when you get out of your, I don't know, place of culture, and you come out to other places, you come back to Africa, you come back to Asia, you come back to, etc. And people are just, they don't have this. They don't have this idea. In most Eastern and African traditions, sexuality is very much a part of how we connect to each other and to the divine. We do not castigate it. We do not vilify it. We do not ostracize it. We don't make it simple. And so in order to quote unquote control the masses, this thing that you use only for survival, we need you to use it for survival. We don't want you to use it for something else. And so we codify that in our religious texts, and we codify that in our culture, and we codify that in the way that we use sex, or that we celebrate men for it, but not women, et cetera. So all of that stuff had been organized in a way to make our culture, that culture survive. And when you come in contact with other cultures, and you're only used to, back there, you're only used to dominating your environment, not being in relationship with it. Like you don't have a relationship with agriculture because you hardly ever have plants. And the relationship that you have with animals is to kill them so that you can eat. They're not pets. They're a mechanism to your survival. So when you come out to any other place, everybody else is also a mechanism for your survival. You have to dominate them as well. And even sex is a domination exercise. And so when you understand the sociological and the cultural parts of how religion came to be, because religion doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens as a result of how we survive out here, and how do we blame this on God? Or what does God have to do with this, et cetera, right? So how do we bargain our existence with God so that we can live, so that we can survive? And that's part of how that culture is born. And so fast forward 1,000 years, 500 years, and then people think that this is just normal. This is just the way that it is. In 500 years, you could change somebody's mind, right? I mean, we're talking about generations, but the general mainstream culture says, oh, sex is bad. But it's only bad because that's what you've heard for the past 500 years from the mainstream culture. If you go outside of your mainstream culture and you go to other cultures and how they use it and how they view it, et cetera, then it's not like that at all. And then you're left like, wait a minute, I've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray. I've been over here and not having a good time, and I didn't have to not have a good time. What is this? And so it's an opportunity for all of us to be critical thinkers and to see, how did we get here? That's why I'm always telling you to check your assumptions, because when you check your assumptions, you have a better idea of how you got here, and you can have a better idea of how to get out. So it is not inherently bad or evil, and it is not inherently an impediment to your spirituality. It is an impediment just as much as food would be if you used it as a numbing mechanism, if you used it as an avoidance mechanism, just like anything, right? And so it doesn't have any special powers to do that. It's just how we use it that is important. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
A long-winded answer, but an answer nonetheless.
Precisely the one I was looking for, though.
Oh, awesome, awesome, awesome. Giovanni, you have your hand up? Uh-oh. Hand up and muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I love that this sentence you created while you were answering the question, or opening the inquiry, if you will, on sensuality and access to spirituality. There is this inherited model for being. What I heard from what you were saying is that there is this inherited model for being a human being, which is dominating my environment.
Mm-hmm.
And the upgraded mind, if you will, the curious and engaged mind, will develop a relationship with the environment rather than dominate it.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. I was like, oh, this is a paradigm shifting. And however, I do want to share my experience of being alive in this context. And it's in my experience traveling in Africa, in Europe, in South America, in the Caribbean, wherever I've been. The only place I haven't been to, but being with people from that culture is Asia. And I'm in a relationship with one. And I'm gonna say something that it's my experience, but I don't know what I'm talking about, right?
Okay.
I can't see, if I could put my finger on this thing, I would say that the closest thing to spirituality is my sensuality. Is developing is developing a cute sense to my senses, and it can be expressed intimately with in a sexual way as well. The world. Yet, what I have experienced is that the furthest that gives this spirituality from people is in royal mess around their sexuality. And every culture, it's like
man.
what I'm is a beautiful opportunity. Not that I'm doing, but there's an opportunity to update human beings' relationship with their sensuality. Absent of doing that, we're going to continue to have sex trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to continue to have this and just relationships that dominating and that
Right.
in every culture has been awful, without any regard to their experience. Anyway, that's what in this conversation.
Okay. Now you were cutting out, so I only got bits and pieces of what you were sharing. I don't know if it's my connection or yours, but what I gathered from what you shared was that you saw that that in your relationship, in your experience, you're seeing how sensuality is a gateway to your spirituality, and to the extent that we suppress it, we're going to have toxic ways, dysfunctional ways that we relate to it, because it has to come out somehow. Is that Cliff noted?
Yeah, I'm sorry that he was cutting off. I said a lot, actually. I said my lifetime experience of being alive in that little sentence. But what I meant to say, but maybe in a shorter sense, is that there's nothing that has gotten me closer to God, or whatever I say spirituality is, than my senses, my sensuality. Yeah. And in the act of being sensual, in this remarkably intentional way to be present, I mean, God is there with you. It's like God's gift to human beings. Mm-hmm. My experience of being alive and traveling to every part of the world, leading to thousands of people, is that the farthest thing, actually, the very thing that gets people completely away from their spirituality is their sensuality. The atrocities that people do with an intuitive relationship with their sensuality, it's just, for the lack of better words and my lack of intellectual effort, it's just disgusting. And what men have done to women is just disgusting. And what men have done to the environment is in this intuitive, immature relationship with their sensuality. So it's like, on one end, what I'm trying to say is, on one end, gosh, if I've seen God, felt God, experienced God, is through my senses, is through my sensuality. Mm-hmm. Yet, if on the other end, where I see the farthest thing from spirituality and God itself is what people do with their sensuality.
Yeah, right.
And it's this thing that this conversation is bringing up for me.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for repeating it, because we missed a lot of that with the connection stuff, but you got to handle it. So I'll say this about that, and that is that when the temptation for the human ego is to control something that they do not understand, because that is the way to ensure survival. It's like, if I don't understand you, I have to control you so you don't kill me. And to the extent that we know that's our go-to, instead of fighting it, instead of fighting our urge to dominate that which we do not understand, it seems to me that the healthiest thing to do is, okay, well then let's understand, so we don't have to control. And when you understand that piece, then you'll see why. I've heard in some traditions that women or the connection to the divine. And I don't think it's because women have any special powers. I think it's because in our bodies, we give birth and we have the body experience of creating life. That's why. And we ascribe the experience of creating life to the divine as well. So whoever it is that can physically do it with our senses, then that's the person that's closest to the divine. Do you see what I mean? And then the act of creating life, such as sex, it doesn't have to just be for that. In many religious and spiritual traditions, sex is used for manifestation. It's used for healing. It's used for, creating an altered state of mind, of connection. It's not just for reproduction, because it isn't just for survival. And so to your point, Yvonne, that we all, in one way or another, short of sexual trauma, we all have experienced sex as something otherworldly and that connects you to higher realms, especially if it's good. But then the culture says, no, this is bad, whatever. So you have like this cognitive dissonance of like, wait, but that's not my experience. And we don't really talk about it in a way that doesn't either vilify the culture or vilify each other. What were you going to say?
I was going to say something that you're giving me access to saying, which is, I think anyone who's in this conversation can recall an experience where is the closest thing to our creator, right? To experiencing that. While at the same time, some people would say is the farthest thing from anything had anything to do with our creator. At the same time, the farthest thing. And I think that it seems to me, I don't know what I'm talking about, but it seems to me that those of us who are on the stand many years ago, who were on the stand, seeing the atrocities that men were doing on their intuitive relationship with their sensuality, they intuitively said, man, that's not the access to God. Don't do it, because you're doing awful things out there. And this thing you're bringing up, this possibility of connecting it, and this possibility of expressing sensuality as the access to spirituality, it seems to me that the challenge is so great. I have doubts that human beings will ever get there.
I hear you. That. Stan, you have something?
Yeah, I think that I understand, Giovanni, to say that the chasm is so great, that divide and that thinking is so great, you don't think that we'll ever really, as a whole society, ever really bridge it. But I think that there will pretty much always be cultures like they are right now that don't have that mindset, and that over time mindsets can change. But I think those who've experienced the fact that you said it in the very beginning. In the beginning was feeling. When we look at it that way, before thought and everything was always feeling. And there are even some people right now who don't have all the senses, but they have feeling. So it's always basic. And when I look at it that way, that in and of itself to me has to be the connection to God. If that's the one thing that we have, and we come with it primordially, we come with that. And that keeps us connected regardless of whatever else is not working, we still have feelings. Right. So that's got to be, it's got to be at the highest level. Not that thought isn't very, very high. So I don't want to take thought out of this.
Let's call it foundational.
Foundation, thank you.
Yeah.
Good word.
Just like Stacy was saying, thank you, Stan. Stacy was saying in the chat, when you colonialize religion, because religion isn't inherently colonial, a colonial mechanism. But when you colonialize religion, it compartmentalizes science and education and work and food and family and everything else. Spirituality among darker nations of peoples on the planet connect all of these as a spiritual practice. It's all one. So that's why we ritualize it. In a lot of religions you'll see, or a lot of spiritual traditions, you'll see that we ritualize the way we eat, the way we do personal hygiene, the way we read, the way we pray, the way we go to sleep, the way we wake up, the way we raise our children, the rituals to move from childhood to manhood, or childhood to womanhood, or childhood to childbearing, et cetera, right? And so every piece of the human cycle in darker nations and in spirituality based out of Africa and out of the Middle East and Asia has that ritualistic thing. When you compartmentalize and you're just a cog in the wheel, there is no such ritual. There is no sacredness in daily movements, and you're just moving to survive. And so that consciousness, I want you to be very, very clear that I'm not talking about white people. I'm talking about colonial mindset, because people who are not white also have that mindset. And so that mindset is what separates us from each other, separates us from nature, has us be like we have to dominate another person, or we have to dominate our environment around us. And when we do that, we separate ourselves also from the divine, because we are each other's gateway to the divine. So I love that. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I appreciate the discussion. This was juicy. This is one of the episodes that makes me say, this should be an hour. But we know we don't have that kind of time. So I appreciate your shares, your contributions, and your dialogue. I will see you next week here in Spiritual Matters Thursday. In the meantime, you know we have some stuff for you to do, right? You know we have some stuff for you to do. Number one, of course, love always. That's the basics, right? We always talk about the basics. Love always, laugh out loud, stress less, eat more plant-based food, give, sleep at least 7 hours, and dance and move every day. Get connected to your body, dance and move and shake your tail, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not just about sex. Sometimes you can just have fun by yourself. And in this way, we get to laugh and be with each other and share our contribution to the world. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Darrell, Jill, family.
Thank you for
Enjoy
inviting
this beautiful
Stacy,
day.
Stan.
Oh, my pleasure.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for
Stacy,
having
being
a
here.
place for me to invite him. Peace
Yeah,
and blessings.
absolutely. Tell him to